The boardroom fell silent as I signed the acquisition papers. It's 47 floors below, through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Chen Technologies. I could see the cleaning crew arriving for their evening shift. Among them, wearing the same navy blue uniform as the others, was Jessica Martinez. The same woman who once told me I would never amount to anything, that I was beneath her family's standards, that loving me was her biggest mistake. Now she was scrubbing the floors of the empire I built from nothing. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you. Make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. She looked up at the towering building, probably wondering which office she'd be assigned to clean tonight. She had no idea that the man she once humiliated for wearing secondhand clothes to her father's charity gala was now the billionaire CEO. Watching her from above, the irony was so perfect it almost felt scripted by fate itself. But this story doesn't start with my triumph. It starts 7 years ago, when I was nobody, and she made sure I knew it. 7 years earlier, I was 24. Years old, and convinced I had found my soulmate. Jessica Martinez was everything I thought I wanted in a partner. Intelligent, beautiful, ambitious, and somehow interested in a guy like me. We met during our senior year at the University of Illinois, Chicago, in Professor Henderson's advanced business strategy class. I was there on a combination of student loans, grants, and pure determination. She was there because her father owned Martinez Real Estate Development and expected his daughter to understand the family business. I still remember the first time I saw her. She walked into that lecture hall wearing a cream-colored blazer that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe, carrying a leather handbag that gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Her dark hair was pulled back in a sleek ponytail, and when she smiled, it lit up the entire room.
Ow.
She took the seat next to mine, not because all the other seats were taken, but because she chose to.
Oh.
During group projects, I discovered that beneath her polished exterior was a sharp mind and a wicked sense of humor. She laughed at my jokes, even the terrible ones. She listened when I talked about my dreams of starting my own company someday. She even seemed impressed when I landed the highest grade in the class on our midterm presentation about emerging markets and technology. What I didn't realize then was that Jessica saw our relationship as a temporary adventure, a walk on the wild side before settling into the life her parents had mapped out for her. I was her college boyfriend. The interesting story she'd tell her real friends later about the time she dated someone from the South Side. After graduation, night security job at Mercy Hospital to pay the bills while working on my business plan during the day. Jessica landed a position at her father's company, starting as a junior project manager with a salary that was triple what I made guarding empty hallways. Despite the growing gap between our financial situations, things seemed to be going well. Between us, she'd pick me up after my shift sometimes, and we'd grab breakfast at Tony's Diner, the only restaurant I could afford to take her to regularly. The problems started when her parents began paying more attention to our relationship. William Martinez was a man who measured success in real estate portfolios and country club memberships. Patricia Martinez was the kind of woman who could spot a fake designer handbag from across a crowded room and considered it a personal insult. They had tolerated their daughter's college romance, but now that she was working in the family business, they expected her to date someone more appropriate to her station. The first real crack in our relationship appeared 6 months after graduation, when Jessica invited me to her father's annual charity gala. The event was held at the Palmer House Hotel, and the invitation specified black tie attire. I spent 2 weeks hunting through thrift stores and rental shops, trying to find a tuxedo I could afford. I finally found a used one that fit reasonably well, though the fabric was slightly worn, and the bow tie was clearly from a different decade. Jessica picked me up that evening in her silver BMW, a graduation gift from her parents. She looked stunning in an emerald green evening gown that complemented her olive skin tone perfectly. When I got into the car, she glanced at my outfit, and her smile faltered slightly. "David, where did you get that tuxedo?" she asked, though. Her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "I found it at a consignment shop in Pilsen," I said, trying to sound casual. "Pretty good deal, actually. The guy said it was barely worn." She bit her lip. A habit I'd learned meant she was stressed. "Maybe we should stop by Nordstrom on the way. They have a rental department." Jessica, I can't afford to rent a tuxedo. For one night, I said. This one is fine. Nobody's going to be looking at me anyway. That turned out to be wildly optimistic. The Palmer House ballroom was a vision of old Chicago elegance, with crystal chandeliers casting warm light over, tables draped in white linen. The city's elite mingled over champagne and d'oeuvres that cost more per bite than I spent on groceries in a week. Jessica guided me through the crowd, introducing me to her parents, friends, and business associates. I could feel their eyes, scanning my outfit, noting every imperfection, every sign that I didn't belong. William Martinez found us near the silent auction tables, where people were casually bidding thousands of dollars on weekend getaways and artwork. He was a tall man with silver hair and the kind of confidence that comes from never having to check a price tag. He shook my hand with the firm grip of someone accustomed to closing deals. "David, good to see you again," he said, though we'd only met twice before, both times briefly. "How's the security business treating you?" Before I could answer, Patricia Martinez appeared beside him, wearing a navy blue dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She looked me up and down with the practiced eye of someone who appraised value for a living. "That's an interesting choice for formal wear," she said, her voice carrying just enough sweetness to mask the criticism underneath. "Very vintage." Jessica's cheeks flushed red. "Mom, David looks handsome," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. The conversation continued for a few more uncomfortable minutes before her parents excused themselves to speak with other guests. I thought the worst was over, but I was wrong. As the evening progressed, I began to notice the looks and whispered comments from other attendees. Jessica's college friends, who were now working at prestigious firms downtown, exchanged glances. When they saw us together, her cousin Ryan Thompson, who worked at an investment group and had clearly harbored feelings for Jessica since childhood, made a point of mentioning his recent promotion and the new Porsche he'd just purchased. The breaking point came during dinner. Jessica and I were seated at a table with her parents and several family friends, including the Kowalskis, who owned a chain of luxury hotels, and the Patels, who had made their fortune in medical device manufacturing. The conversation flowed around topics I could barely contribute to: vacation homes in Aspen, yacht clubs on Lake Michigan, private school recommendations for children I didn't know existed. Mrs. Kowalski, a woman in her 60s with perfectly styled blonde hair, was telling a story about her recent trip to Paris when she turned to me. "David, Jessica tells us you're in security. That must be fascinating. Do you work with any of the major firms downtown?" "I work at Mercy Hospital." I said, "Night shift, mostly. It pays the bills while I'm working on starting my own business." The table fell quiet for a moment. "Doctor?" Patel leaned forward with what looked like genuine interest. "What kind of business?" he asked. This was my chance to impress them, to show that I had ambition and vision. I'd been working on my business plan for months, researching artificial intelligence applications for small businesses, studying market trends, reaching out to potential investors. I launched into my elevator pitch about AI-powered customer service solutions for restaurants and retail stores, explaining how small businesses could compete with larger corporations by automating routine tasks while maintaining personalized service. I was halfway through explaining my revenue projections when I noticed the polite but glassy-eyed expressions around the table. These people dealt in millions of dollars in established industries. My scrappy startup idea probably sounded like a fantasy to them. "That's very ambitious," Dr. Patel said when I finished. "The tech sector can be quite challenging for new entrants, especially without proper funding or connections," William Martinez added. "Most startups fail within the first year." "But that's what makes it exciting," I said, probably with too much enthusiasm. "The barrier to entry in AI is lower than it's ever been. You don't need a massive team or a huge office space to build something revolutionary. Just good ideas and the willingness to work harder than everyone else." Patricia Martinez smiled the way people smile at children who've said something cute, but naive. "It's a lovely attitude, David, very optimistic." The conversation moved on to safer topics, but I could feel the judgment in the air. When Jessica excused herself to visit the ladies' room, her mother leaned over to speak with Mrs. Kowalski, their voices low, but not quite low enough. Jessica's still young, I heard Patricia say. She'll grow out of this phase. College romances rarely last, Mrs. Kowalski agreed. She realized what's important soon enough. When Jessica returned, she seemed different. She barely spoke to me for the rest of the evening, and when we finally left the gala around midnight, the car ride home was tense with unspoken words. Your parents' friends seem nice, I said, trying to break the silence. They're very successful people, she replied, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. I probably came on a little strong with the business talk. I just get excited when people ask about my plans, she sighed, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of the entire evening. David, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you ever think about what your life is going to look like in 10 years? Really think about it? The question caught me off guard. Every day. I think about building my company, maybe having a family someday, traveling to places I've only read about. Why? She was quiet for a long moment, stopped at a red light on Michigan Avenue. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The city lights reflected off her windshield, casting moving shadows across her face. I think about it too, she said finally. I think about the house I want, to live in, the kind of life I want to give my children, the social circles I want to be part of. I think about charity galas and country club memberships and private schools. I think about marrying someone who understands that world, who belongs in it naturally. My stomach dropped, but I tried to keep my voice steady. Are you saying I don't belong in that world? I'm saying you'd have to change who you are to fit into it. I don't know if either of us wants that. The light turned green, and she drove in silence until we reached my apartment building. The contrast between her BMW and the rundown laundromat on the ground floor of my building had never felt more stark. Jessica, if this is about money, I'm going to make it someday. The business plan is solid. I just need to find the right investors. It's not just about money, she interrupted. It's about understanding. Tonight, when you were talking about your startup, you sounded like you were trying to convince yourself as much as everyone else. My parents' friends weren't being mean when they questioned your plans. They've seen hundreds of young entrepreneurs with big dreams and no realistic path to success. Her words hit me like a physical blow. So you don't believe in me either? I believe you're smart and hardworking, she said. But believing in someone doesn't mean ignoring reality. David, you work security at a hospital. You wear thrift store clothes to formal events? Can't afford to take me to dinner anywhere nicer than Tony's Diner. That's not your fault, but it's the truth. And that truth means I'm not good enough. For you? She turned to look at me then, and I could see tears forming in her eyes. It means we want different things. I want the life I grew up with. I want to maintain the standard I'm used to. I want to be with someone who can provide that without having to completely reinvent himself first. I sat in that car for what felt like hours, but was probably only a few minutes, processing what she'd just told me. The woman I'd thought I might marry someday had just explained, with brutal honesty, that I wasn't successful enough, wealthy enough, or established enough to be worthy of her love. So what happens now? I asked. I think we should take a break, she said. Give each other some space to figure out what we really want. I got out of the car without another word. As I watched her drive away, her taillights disappearing into the Chicago night, I felt something inside me break. But alongside the heartbreak was something else, something harder and more determined. Jessica Martinez had just told me I wasn't good enough for her world. I decided to prove her wrong. The next morning, I threw myself into my business plan with an intensity that bordered on obsession. I researched every successful tech startup from the past decade, studied their funding strategies, analyzed their growth patterns. I reached out to potential customers, refined my software concept, and began building a prototype using free development tools and tutorials I found online. For 3 months, I heard nothing from Jessica. I saw her social media posts occasionally, photos of her at various social events with her family and friends. In several pictures, I noticed Ryan Thompson appearing more frequently, always dressed impeccably, always fitting seamlessly into the elegant settings I'd felt so out of place in. Then came the invitation that changed everything. It arrived on expensive cardstock, embossed with gold lettering. Mr. and Mrs. William Martinez requested. the honor of my presence at an engagement party for their daughter Jessica and Ryan Thompson. The party was scheduled for the following Saturday at their home in Lincoln Park. I stared at that invitation for a long time, reading it over and over, making sure I wasn't misinterpreting the words. Jessica was engaged to Ryan. The timeline meant she'd gotten engaged less than 3 months after our breakup, probably to someone she'd been getting close to while we were still together. The smart thing would have been to throw the invitation away and move on with my life. Instead, I decided to attend. I wanted to see for myself how quickly I'd been replaced, how easily she'd moved into the future she'd described to me that night. In her car, I bought a new suit for the occasion, using money I'd been saving for my business. It wasn't designer quality, but it was new, and it fit properly. I even splurged on a decent haircut and new shoes. If I was going to witness my own replacement, I was going to do it with whatever dignity I could muster. The Martinez family home was a 3-story brownstone in one of Lincoln Park's most exclusive neighborhoods. Cars worth more than most people's annual salaries lined the street. I parked my beat-up Honda Civic 3 blocks away and walked to the house, feeling increasingly out of place with each step. The front door was answered by a woman in a catering uniform who directed me to the backyard where the party was already in full swing. String lights hung between trees, jazz music played from hidden speakers, and guests mingled on a patio that was larger than my entire apartment. Jessica stood near the center of it all, radiant in a white cocktail dress, her left hand prominently displaying an engagement ring that caught the light every time she gestured. Ryan stood beside her with his arm around her waist, accepting congratulations from a steady stream of well-wishers. He looked exactly like what he was, the perfect choice for someone like Jessica. Tall, handsome, well-dressed, and completely comfortable in this environment because he'd been born into it. I grabbed a glass of champagne from a passing server and tried to blend into the crowd, observing the scene like an anthropologist studying an alien culture. These people spoke a language I recognized but didn't truly understand. Full of references to places I'd never been and experiences I'd never had. David. I turned to find Jessica standing behind me, her face a mixture of surprise and something else I couldn't quite identify. Guilt, maybe, or disappointment that I'd actually shown up. "Hi, Jessica," I said. "Congratulations. Ryan seems like a great guy." She glanced back toward her fiancé, who was deep in conversation with her father, and several other men in expensive suits. "Thank you. I'm surprised you came. I wanted to wish you well. We were friends before we were anything else." She nodded, but I could see the discomfort in her posture. "How are you doing? How's the business coming along? Still working?" "On it. These things take time." There was an awkward silence as we both tried to think of something else to say. Finally, Jessica looked directly at me, and I saw something in her eyes that might have been pity. "David, I hope you understand that what happened between us wasn't personal. You're a good person. You deserve to be happy. Just not with you." She flinched slightly. "We wanted different things. That's not anyone's fault." Before I could respond, Ryan appeared beside her, sliding his arm around her shoulders with the casual possessiveness of someone who'd never had to worry about competition. "Ryan, this is David," Jessica said. "We went to college together." Ryan extended his hand with a politician's smile. "Great to meet you, David. Any friend of Jessica's is welcome here." As we shook hands, I noticed his Rolex, his perfectly tailored suit. The way he carried himself with the confidence of someone who'd never been told he wasn't good enough for anything he wanted. This was the man Jessica had chosen instead of me. This was what she meant when she talked about understanding her world. "David was just telling me about his business venture," Jessica said, though I hadn't mentioned it. "Something with computers, right? Artificial intelligence," I said. "Customer service applications for small businesses?" Ryan nodded politely. "That sounds interesting. Are you looking for investors?" The question was clearly meant to be conversational, but something in his tone suggested he already knew the answer. I realized that Jessica had told him about my financial situation. Was probably laughing about my naive business dreams and thrift store formal wear. "I'm focusing on bootstrapping the initial development," I said, "building a solid proof of concept before seeking outside funding." "Smart approach," Ryan said, though his expression suggested he thought it was anything but smart. The tech sector can be pretty unforgiving to underfunded startups. But hey, you never know what might happen. He said it with the kind of false encouragement people offer when they're absolutely certain nothing will happen. Jessica squeezed his arm and smiled up at him with pure adoration, the same way she used to look at me when I talked about my dreams. I finished my champagne and made polite excuses about needing to leave early. As I walked back to my car, I could hear the party continuing behind me, the sound of people celebrating a future I would never be part of. Jessica had moved on seamlessly. From our relationship to her engagement, surrounded by people who approved of her choice and validated her decision to choose security over love. That night, alone in my apartment, I made myself a promise. Jessica Martinez believed I would never amount to anything. I was destined to remain a security guard with unrealistic dreams and discount store clothes. Her parents thought I was a phase their daughter would grow out of. Ryan Thompson saw me as so unthreatening he could afford to be condescending. They were all about to discover just how wrong they were. The Monday morning after Jessica's engagement party, I walked into Mercy Hospital for what would be my final shift as a security guard. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as I made my rounds through the empty corridors. But my mind was elsewhere, replaying every conversation from the weekend. Every subtle insult disguised as concern. Every pitying glance from people who saw me as Jessica's temporary lapse in judgment. At 3 a.m, sitting alone at the security desk, I opened my laptop and began typing furiously. If the Martinez family and their friends thought my business idea was naive, then I needed to prove them wrong with more than just passion. In determination, I needed data, projections, and a prototype that would make investors take notice. For the next 6 months, I lived like a monk dedicated to a single purpose. My shift at the hospital ended at 7 a.m, and by 8 I was in the Chicago Public Library. Occupying the same corner table day after day, surrounded by programming books and business journals, I taught myself Python, studied machine learning algorithms, and built my first crude chatbot using open-source tools and sheer stubborn persistence. The breakthrough came on a rainy Thursday in November. I'd been testing my customer service AI on a friend's small restaurant website when the system successfully handled a complex order modification that would have required human intervention. With existing solutions, the bot not only processed the change, but suggested complementary menu items that increased the order value by 30%. For the first time since Jessica's engagement party, I allowed myself to believe I might actually have something worth pursuing. I quit my security job the next day, despite having only 3 months of expenses saved up. My supervisor, Mrs. Rodriguez, who had been kind to me during my 2 years there, looked concerned when I submitted my resignation. "David, you're one of our most reliable employees," she said. "Are you sure about this? The job market is tough." "Right now, I'm starting my own company," I told her. "I've been working on it for months, and I think I'm ready to make the jump." She wished me luck, but I could see the skepticism in her eyes. Another young person with big dreams and no safety net, probably destined to come crawling back within a few months. I moved out of my apartment and into a studio that was barely larger than a closet, located above a 24-hour laundromat in Pilsen. The constant noise of washing machines and dryers became the soundtrack of my new life as a full-time entrepreneur. I ate ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches, wore the same 3 shirts in rotation, and channeled every dollar I could scrape together into building my business. The isolation was crushing at first. My college friends had scattered to various corporate jobs around the city. Most of them thought I'd lost my mind for giving up steady employment to chase what they saw as a pipe dream. My parents, Robert and Linda Chen, who had immigrated from Taiwan and worked multiple jobs to put me through college, were horrified by my decision. "David, we didn't sacrifice everything so you could throw away a good job," my mother said during one of our increasingly tense phone conversations. "Security work is honest work. It has benefits, steady pay. This computer business is too risky." "Mom, I'm not throwing anything away. I'm building something. The AI market is exploding right now, and I have a real opportunity to get in early." "Jessica's father owns buildings all over Chicago," my father interjected from the background. "That's real business. That's something you can touch and see. This artificial intelligence sounds like science fiction. Mention of Jessica stung, but it also reminded me why I was doing this. My parents still believed their son's highest aspiration should be winning back the girl who had deemed him unworthy. They couldn't understand that I was no longer interested in proving myself to Jessica Martinez. I was proving something to myself. By February, I had a working prototype and my first real client. Tony's Diner, the same restaurant where Jessica and I used to eat breakfast, agreed to let me install my system for free in exchange for feedback and the right to use their data as a case study. Within 2 weeks, the AI was handling 60% of their phone orders, and Tony reported that average order values had increased by 25%. This thing is incredible, Tony told me as we reviewed the weekly reports. It remembers customers' usual orders, suggests additions based on what they've ordered before, and it never gets impatient or makes mistakes writing down complicated modifications. You've got something special here, kid. That first success opened doors to 3 more small restaurants, then a clothing boutique, then a dental office that wanted automated appointment scheduling. I wasn't making enough money to live comfortably, but I was making enough to survive. And more importantly, I was learning something new with every implementation. The real validation came in April, when I received a phone call from Emma Walsh, a venture capital analyst who had heard about my work through one of her portfolio companies. She wanted to meet for coffee to discuss my business model and growth plans. I arrived at the Starbucks on North Michigan Avenue 15 minutes early, wearing my one good shirt and the same dress pants I'd worn to Jessica's engagement party. Emma was already there, sharp-looking woman in her early 30s, with short red hair and the kind of focused energy that suggested she didn't waste time on projects that didn't interest her. "David Chen," she said, standing to shake my hand. "I'm Emma Walsh from Lakefront Ventures. Thank you for meeting with me." We spent 2 hours going through my business model, customer acquisition strategy, and financial projections. Emma asked detailed questions about my technology stack, competitive advantages, and scalability plans. Unlike the polite but dismissive reception I'd received at Jessica's father's charity gala, Emma's questions were sharp and substantive. "Your customer retention rate is impressive," she said, scrolling through the data on her tablet. 94% after 6 months of service. That's significantly higher than industry average for SMB software solutions. The AI learns from each interaction, I explained. The longer a business uses the system, the more valuable it becomes. Customers aren't just buying software, they're buying an assistant that gets smarter over time. Emma nodded, making notes. "What's your biggest challenge right now?" "Sales and marketing. I can build great technology, but I don't have the resources or connections to reach the businesses that would benefit most from it. Still cold calling restaurants from Yellow Pages listings. What would you do with proper funding?" Question hung in the air between us. This was my moment, the opportunity I'd been working toward for almost a year. I thought about Jessica telling me that my dreams weren't realistic, about her parents' friends politely dismissing my ambitions, about Ryan Thompson's condescending encouragement. "I'd hire a real sales team and expand beyond Chicago," I said. "There are 50,000 small restaurants in Illinois alone, and most of them are still using systems from the 1990s. With proper funding, I could capture 5% of that market within 2 years. And after that, retail, professional services, any business that interacts with customers, the technology scales horizontally across industries. This isn't just about restaurants. It's about giving small businesses the same technological advantages that only Fortune 500 companies could afford before." Emma closed her tablet and leaned back in her chair. "David, I'm going to be direct with you. Your technology is solid, your business model makes sense, and your early traction is encouraging. But you're a first-time founder with no management experience and no established network in the tech industry. That makes you high risk from an investment standpoint." My heart sank. This was going to be another polite rejection, another reminder that I didn't have the right background or connections to succeed at this level. "However," Emma continued, "I think the risk is worth taking. Lakefront Ventures would like to offer you a Series A investment of $2 million for 20% equity, with an additional $2 million available as a Series B if you hit specific growth milestones over the next 18 months. I stared at her, not quite believing what I'd just heard. $2 million. More money than I'd ever imagined having access to, enough to transform my scrappy one-man operation into a real company. I need to discuss this with my partners, of course, Emma said. But I'm confident we can have term sheets ready within a week. Are you interested in moving forward? I managed to stammer out something that sounded like acceptance, and we shook hands again. As I walked out of that Starbucks, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from my friend Carlos, who still worked downtown and occasionally passed along industry gossip, saw an announcement in Cranes. Martinez Real Estate laying off 30% of staff. Development projects on hold due to financing issues. Rough times for that family. I stopped walking and read the message twice. William Martinez's real estate empire, the foundation of the family's wealth and social status, was struggling. The same man who had questioned my business plan was now facing his own financial crisis. That evening, I sat in my tiny studio apartment, surrounded by the constant rumble of washing machines, and realized something fundamental had shifted. For months, I'd been the one scrambling for credibility, begging for opportunities, trying to prove I deserved a seat at the table. Now, for the first time, I was the one with options. I was the one that sophisticated investors wanted to back. Jessica Martinez's family had dismissed me as a security guard with unrealistic dreams. In 9 months, I'd built a business that venture capitalists were willing to fund with millions of dollars. The boy they'd considered beneath their notice was about to become their peer, whether they recognized it or not. But I wasn't done yet. This was just the beginning. With $2 million in Series A funding, everything changed overnight. I moved Chen Technologies into a proper office space in River North, hired my first 3 employees, and began the complex process of scaling a business that had previously existed entirely inside my laptop. The learning curve was steep, but Emma Walsh had connected me with experienced advisors who helped navigate the transition from solo founder to actual CEO. My first major hire was Marcus Kim, sales director who had previously worked at Salesforce and understood how to sell enterprise software to small businesses. He took one look at my handwritten customer list and started laughing. "David, you've been doing this backwards," he said, reviewing my collection of Post-it notes and spreadsheets. "You built great technology and then went looking for customers. Who might want it? We need to find customers who are actively looking for solutions and then show them why ours is better than anything else available." Within 3 months, Marcus had built a proper sales funnel, hired for inside sales representatives, and established partnerships with 3 restaurant industry associations. Our monthly recurring revenue doubled, then doubled again. The technology that I had originally built for Tony's Diner was now serving over 200 businesses across the Midwest. But success brought new challenges, and some of them came from unexpected directions. In August, I received a cease and desist letter from Thompson Investment Group, claiming that Chen Technologies was infringing on a software patent they allegedly owned. The patent was broadly written and covered basic AI customer interaction protocols that had been in use for years before. Ryan Thompson's company had filed their application. I showed the letter to my lawyer, Sarah Davidson, who specialized in intellectual property disputes. She read through the documents with the kind of focused intensity that made her hourly rate worth every penny. "This is what we call a nuisance lawsuit," she said finally. "Patent claims are weak, and they know it. They're hoping you'll settle rather than fight, because fighting will cost you time and money you can't afford to lose during your growth phase. Can they actually shut us down? Not with these claims, but they can make your life expensive and complicated while we work through the legal process. Discovery alone could take 18 months and cost $500,000. About Ryan Thompson's condescending smile at Jessica's engagement party, the way he'd dismissed my business as an interesting but unrealistic venture. Now that Chen Technologies was taking market share from established players, he was trying to use the legal system to slow our progress. What do they want? Sarah handed me a settlement proposal that had been attached to the cease and desist letter. 20% of your company's equity in exchange for dropping the lawsuit and licensing their patent portfolio for future development. I read through the proposal twice, feeling my anger build with each paragraph. Ryan wasn't just trying to extract money from my success. He wanted to become a major stakeholder in the company I'd built from nothing. He wanted to profit from the very business he'd implied would never amount to anything. "We fight," I told Sarah. "I don't care how long it takes or how much it costs. We're not giving them anything." The legal battle consumed the next 8 months of my life. While Marcus and his team continued growing our customer base, I spent countless hours in depositions, document reviews, and strategy meetings with our legal team. The stress was enormous, but it also clarified something important. I was no longer the desperate young man who would do anything to gain acceptance from people like the Martinez family. I had resources now, and I wasn't afraid to use them to protect what I'd built. During this period, I also discovered that my success was creating problems for people who had dismissed me earlier. Through Chicago's interconnected business community, word got back to me that Jessica's father was struggling to secure financing for his latest development project. The same banks and investment firms that had once courted Martinez real estate were now questioning William's decision-making and risk management strategies. The irony wasn't lost on me when I received an invitation to speak at the Chicago Small Business Innovation Summit, an event that was partially sponsored by Martinez Real Estate Development. William Martinez would be delivering the opening keynote about traditional industries embracing technological change. While I was scheduled to speak during the afternoon session about AI solutions for service industries, I almost declined the invitation, but then I realized this was an opportunity to see how the dynamics had shifted. 2 years earlier, I'd been the young man in the thrift store tuxedo, trying desperately to make conversation at William's charity gala. Now, I was the founder of a company that industry publications were calling one of Chicago's most promising tech startups. The day of the summit, I arrived at the Palmer House Hotel wearing a custom-tailored suit from a downtown boutique that specialized in executive wardrobes. The same ballroom where I'd felt so out of place at the charity gala was now filled with entrepreneurs, investors, and business leaders who treated me as a peer rather than in curiosity. William Martinez's keynote was polished but defensive, focusing heavily on the stability and reliability of traditional real estate investment while making only token references to technological innovation. From my seat in the front row, I could see the strain around his eyes, the subtle signs of a man who was working harder to maintain appearances than he wanted anyone to know. After his speech, he stepped down from the podium and walked directly toward me. We hadn't spoken since Jessica's engagement party, but he approached with the same confident handshake and professional smile he'd always used. "David, good to see you again," he said. "I understand congratulations are in order. It's very impressive what you've built with your technology company." "Thank you, Mr. Martinez. I appreciate that. We might have some opportunities to work together. Real estate is becoming increasingly technology dependent, and I've been looking for the right partners to help modernize our operations." The conversation that followed was surreal. The same man who had questioned my business acumen at his dinner table was now pitching me on potential collaboration opportunities. He spoke about integrating AI systems into property management, automating tenant communications, and streamlining lease negotiations. Every suggestion was framed as a mutually beneficial partnership, but I could read between the lines. Martinez Real Estate needed the kind of technological edge that Chen Technologies could provide. Be happy to have my team put together. "A proposal," I said, maintaining the same polite professionalism he was showing me. "We're always interested in exploring new market segments." As we talked, I noticed Jessica approaching from across the room. She was dressed in a navy blue business suit and looked as elegant as ever, but there was something different about her demeanor. The effortless confidence she'd always carried seemed more forced, more carefully constructed.
Ow.
"David, what a surprise." "To see you here," she said, joining our conversation. "Daddy was just telling me about your company's success. It's very impressive. Thank you. How are you? How's married life treating you?" "Wonderfully," she said, but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Ryan and I are very happy. He's been expanding Thompson Investment Group's technology portfolio, actually. I'm sure you two have a lot in common now." The subtext was clear. She was reminding me that Ryan was still successful, still operating in the same elevated business circles where I'd once felt so out of place. What she didn't know was that Ryan's legal challenge had made him more of a rival than a peer in my mind. My presentation that afternoon went better than I'd expected. The audience was engaged, asking detailed questions about implementation strategies and ROI calculations. Several attendees approached me afterward with business cards and specific inquiries about customizing our platform for their industries. As I was packing up my materials, Jessica appeared beside my table. The other attendees had moved toward the reception area, leaving us relatively alone in the ballroom. "That was a great presentation," she said. "You've really found your confidence. As a speaker, thank you. It comes with practice." "David, can I ask you something personal?" I looked up from my laptop bag, curious where this conversation was heading. "Are you happy?" she asked. "I mean, really happy. All this success, building your company, proving everyone wrong, is it what you thought it would be?" Question caught me off guard. I'd expected her to make polite conversation about business or mutual acquaintances, not to probe into my emotional state. "I'm satisfied with what I've accomplished," I said carefully. "Why do you ask?" "Because I remember how excited you used to get talking about your dreams. You had this energy, this passion for building something meaningful. At the charity gala, when you were explaining your business idea to my parents' friends, you weren't just talking about making money. You were talking about changing how small businesses compete with larger corporations, about democratizing technology." She paused, looking around the elegant ballroom where her father's keynote had taken place just hours earlier.
"How do you sound?"
Like every other successful CEO, giving calculated answers about satisfaction and accomplishment. I wondered if achieving your goals had cost you some of the idealism that made you interesting in the first place. Her words stung because they contained an uncomfortable grain of truth. The legal battle with Ryan's company, the pressure of managing investors and employees. The constant focus on growth metrics and competitive positioning had gradually shifted. My perspective from passionate innovation to strategic calculation, maybe that's what growing up looks like, I said. Maybe idealism is a luxury you can only afford when you don't have real responsibilities. Or maybe it's what you lose when you start measuring your worth by other people's definitions of success. Before I could respond to that observation, Ryan appeared beside us, as if he'd been watching our conversation from across the room. He slipped his arm around Jessica's waist with the same casual possessiveness I remembered from their engagement party. "David, great to see you again," he said with apparent sincerity. "Sorry about all that legal unpleasantness between our companies." "Business is business, you understand, nothing personal." I looked at him. I did. This man who had tried to extract equity from the company I'd built through years of sacrifice and determination, and realized that he genuinely believed his own words. In his world, attempting to financially cripple a competitor through frivolous litigation was simply business strategy, no different from any other competitive tactic. "Of course," I said, "nothing personal." But as I walked away from that conversation, I knew something fundamental had changed in how I viewed the people who had once dismissed me. They were no longer the arbiters of success I'd once desperately wanted to impress. They were simply obstacles to overcome on my way to something much larger than their approval. 18 months after the legal battle began, our attorneys delivered news that changed everything. Not only had we successfully defeated Thomson Investment Group's patent claims, but our countersuit had uncovered evidence of systematic fraud in their intellectual property portfolio. Ryan had been filing bogus patent applications and using them to extract settlements from smaller tech companies who couldn't afford to fight back. The Chicago Business Journal ran the story on their front page. "Investment firm faces federal investigation for patent fraud." The article detailed how Thomson Investment Group had collected over $15 million in fraudulent settlements over 3 years, targeting startups and small businesses who lacked the resources to challenge their claims in court. I was in my office reviewing quarterly financial reports when Emma Walsh called with an update that made the legal victory seem almost insignificant by comparison. "David, I just got off a call with Chen Technologies board," she said, her voice containing barely suppressed excitement. "Google wants to acquire you. They're offering $800 million for full ownership of the company and your AI platform." I set down my pen and stared out the window at the Chicago skyline, trying to process what she'd just told me. $800 million? The security guard who used to walk empty hospital corridors was being offered nearly $1 billion for the business he'd built in a studio apartment above a laundromat. What's the timeline? I asked. They want an answer within 2 weeks. But David, there's something else. Microsoft heard about Google's offer and they're preparing a competing bid. This could turn into an auction. That evening, I drove through Lincoln Park, past the Martinez family's brownstone, where I'd attended Jessica's engagement party 3 years earlier. The house looked the same from the outside, but I knew the family's circumstances had changed dramatically. Williams' real estate empire had lost 2 major development deals when their primary lender had pulled financing, citing concerns about market conditions and management decisions. I parked across the street and sat in my Tesla Model S, thinking about the journey that had brought me to this moment. The boy who had been humiliated for wearing a secondhand tuxedo now owned a car that cost more than most people made in a year. The young man who had been told his dreams weren't realistic was about to become one of the wealthiest individuals in Chicago. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "David, this is Jessica. Could we meet for coffee tomorrow? There's something I need to discuss with you. It's important." I stared at the message for several minutes before responding. Starbucks on Michigan Avenue. 10 a.m. The next morning, Jessica was already waiting when I arrived, sitting at the same table where Emma Walsh had offered me my first venture capital investment 3 years earlier. She looked older, more tired than I remembered, and there was something desperate in her eyes that I'd never seen before. "Thank you for meeting me," she said as I sat down across from her. "I wasn't sure you would. What did you want to discuss?" She took a deep breath, as if steeling herself for a difficult conversation. "I heard about Google's acquisition offer. Congratulations. You've accomplished everything you set out to do." "How did you hear about that?" "The deal hasn't been announced publicly," Ryan told me. "He's been tracking your company's progress ever since the patent lawsuit started. He knew about the acquisition discussions before they became official." I felt a flash of anger at the thought of Ryan monitoring my business activities, but I kept my expression neutral. And, "David, I need to be honest with you about something. About why Ryan pursued the patent litigation, and about some things that happened while we were still together." She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope, sliding it across the table toward me. Inside were printouts of email exchanges between Ryan and Jessica, dating back to our senior year in college. "Ow. I want you to read these," she said quietly. The first email was sent 2 weeks before our breakup, with Ryan advising Jessica about managing the situation with David and suggesting strategies for transitioning to a more suitable relationship. The correspondence painted a picture of calculated manipulation, Ryan feeding Jessica specific talking points about my financial limitations and encouraging her to compare our relationship unfavorably to the lifestyle she could have with someone from her social class. The most damaging email was sent the day after the charity gala, where I'd felt so out of place. The tuxedo situation worked perfectly. He looked exactly as out of place as we hoped. "Your parents got the message loud and clear. Now we just need to make sure he understands that he can't provide the life you deserve." I read through the entire exchange twice, feeling a mixture of vindication and disgust. My relationship with Jessica hadn't failed because we wanted different things, as she'd claimed. It had been systematically destroyed by someone who saw me as competition and decided to eliminate the threat. "Why are you showing me this now?" I asked. "Because Ryan is planning to do it again," she said, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "He's been monitoring your company's growth, waiting for the right moment to cause maximum damage. The patent lawsuit was just the beginning. He has evidence of some minor regulatory compliance issues from your early days before you had proper legal counsel. He's planning to report them to the SEC right before your acquisition closes, hoping to delay or kill the deal." "Ah! Why would you warn me? Aren't you married to him?" Jessica looked down at her hands, and I noticed she wasn't wearing her wedding ring. We separated 6 months ago. I found out about other things he'd done, other people he'd hurt to advance his career. The patent fraud investigation revealed a lot more than just fake intellectual property claims. She looked up at me with eyes that held genuine remorse. "David, I know I hurt you terribly. I know I chose security over love, status over substance. But I need you to understand that some of those choices weren't entirely my own. Ryan manipulated both of us, and I was too caught up in the lifestyle I thought I wanted to see what was happening. What exactly do you want from me? I want to help you stop him. I have access to his files, his correspondence, his plans. For sabotaging your acquisition, if you're willing to work with me, we can make sure he can't hurt you again. I studied her face, looking for signs of deception or hidden agenda. The woman sitting across from me bore little resemblance to the confident socialite who had dismissed my dreams at her engagement party. This Jessica looked vulnerable, almost broken, like someone who had finally seen the cost of the choices she'd made.
"What's in this for you?" I asked. "Nothing," she said. "Maybe that's why I have to do it. For 3 years I've been living
with the knowledge that I helped destroy something real because I was afraid of being judged by people whose opinions shouldn't have mattered. I can't change what happened between us, but maybe I can prevent him from taking away what you've built." That afternoon, Jessica provided me with detailed documentation of Ryan's plans to sabotage the Google acquisition. The evidence was comprehensive. Correspondence with a corrupt SEC investigator, plans to leak misleading information to business journalists, and strategies for creating regulatory delays that would give competing bidders time to withdraw their offers. I forwarded everything to Sarah Davidson, who immediately recognized the criminal implications of what Ryan was attempting. Within 48 hours, federal agents had raided Thompson Investment Group's offices, seizing computers and files that contained evidence of not just patent fraud, but securities manipulation, bribery of government officials, and conspiracy to interfere with legitimate business transactions. The Chicago Tribune's headline the next morning read, "Investment Executive Arrested in Multi-Million-Dollar Fraud Scheme." The article detailed Ryan Thompson's systematic abuse of the legal and regulatory system to eliminate business competitors and extract money from smaller companies. But the most satisfying revelation came in the article's final paragraph. Federal investigators believe Thompson's schemes may have affected dozens of Chicago-area startups over the past 5 years, with total damages estimated in excess of $50 million. Ryan Thompson, the man who had once dismissed my dreams as unrealistic, was now facing federal charges that could result in decades in prison. The golden boy of Chicago's investment community had been revealed as a criminal who had built his success by destroying other people's legitimate businesses. 2 weeks later, I sat in Google's Chicago offices, signing the final documents that would make me one of the youngest billionaires in the city's history. The acquisition had proceeded without interference, and Microsoft's competing bid had driven the final price to $1. $2 billion. As I walked out of that conference room, officially no longer the CEO of Chen Technologies, but now wealthy beyond anything I'd ever imagined possible, I thought about the journey that had brought me to this moment. Jessica Martinez had humiliated me for being poor, telling me I would never be successful enough to deserve her love. Her family had dismissed me as a phase their daughter would outgrow. Ryan Thompson had tried to destroy my business through fraud and manipulation. Now Jessica was divorced and working as a marketing consultant, struggling to rebuild her career after the scandal surrounding her ex-husband. Her father's real estate empire was in bankruptcy proceedings, and Ryan was in federal prison, his investment firm dissolved, and his assets frozen by court order. The transformation was complete. The security guard they had all looked down upon was now wealthier than any of them would ever be. But the real victory wasn't the money or the public vindication. It was the knowledge that I had built something meaningful, something that provided value to thousands of businesses and their customers. Something that existed because I had refused to accept other people's limitations on my potential. The boy they had dismissed was now the man who could buy and sell their entire world without thinking twice about it. 6 months after the acquisition, I stood in my corner office on the 47th floor of the newly constructed Chen Tower, the gleaming headquarters of my next venture, Chen Enterprises, a holding company that invested in emerging technologies and promising startups. The view of Lake Michigan stretched endlessly toward the horizon. Far below, the city where I'd once struggled to make rent now bustled with the energy of commerce I helped drive. My assistant knocked and entered with the afternoon's reports. "Mr. Chen, the cleaning service contract proposals are on your desk for review." Premier Facility Services submitted the winning bid. Glanced at the document, noting the company name with dark amusement. Premier Facility Services was a subsidiary of Martinez Holdings, the remnants of William Martinez's collapsed real estate empire. The former development mogul had been forced to liquidate most of his properties and pivot to service-based businesses just to avoid complete bankruptcy. That evening, as I worked late reviewing acquisition targets in the biotechnology sector, I noticed the cleaning crew beginning their rounds on my floor. Through my office's glass walls, I watched them methodically work their way down the corridor, emptying trash bins and wiping down surfaces with the kind of quiet efficiency that comes from honest labor. Then I saw her, Jessica Martinez, wearing the navy blue uniform of Premier Facility Services, pushing a cart filled with cleaning supplies toward the executive wing. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she moved with the purposeful stride of someone who had learned to take pride in whatever work paid the bills. She noticed me watching and paused outside my office door. For a moment, we simply looked at each other through the glass. Two people whose lives had taken such different trajectories from that night in her BMW when she'd explained why I wasn't good enough for her world. I pressed the button that unlocked my office door, and she entered hesitantly, leaving her cleaning cart in the hallway. "Hello, David," she said quietly. "I wasn't sure if you knew I worked here." "I sign all the major contracts," I replied. "I knew Premier was part of your father's new business structure. Keeps us afloat," she said without self-pity. "Honest work, steady clients. We're rebuilding slowly." I studied her face, looking for resentment or bitterness, but found neither. The woman standing in my office bore a little resemblance to the privileged socialite who had once dismissed my dreams. This Jessica seemed grounded, humbled by circumstances, but not broken by them. "Are you happy?" I asked, echoing the question. She'd posed to me at the business summit years earlier. She considered the question carefully. "I'm at peace with who I am now. I spent so many years measuring my worth by external things, status, wealth, other people's approval. Losing all that forced me to discover what actually matters. And what matters? Integrity. Treating people with respect regardless of their circumstances. Building something real instead of just maintaining appearances." She paused, looking around my luxurious office. "I think you already knew those things, even when we were together. I was too immature to recognize their value." We talked for 20 more minutes about her father's business, her work with the cleaning service, and the strange turns life had taken for both of us. There was no romance in the conversation, no suggestion that past wounds could be healed or relationships rekindled. We had become different people, shaped by different experiences, traveling different paths. As she prepared to leave, Jessica turned back one final time. "David, I want you to know that I'm genuinely proud of what you've accomplished. Not just the financial success, but the way you've used it. I've read about your scholarship programs, the startup incubator you funded, the small businesses you've helped expand. You became exactly the person you said you would be." After she left, I remained in my office for another hour, watching the city lights flicker to life in the darkness. Below, the security guard who had once walked empty hospital corridors now controlled assets worth billions of dollars. The young man who had been humiliated for his secondhand tuxedo now had his name on buildings throughout Chicago. But the real transformation wasn't measured in dollars or square footage. It was measured in the knowledge that I had stayed true to the vision I'd articulated in that university classroom years ago, using technology to level the playing field for small businesses, creating opportunities for people who had been overlooked by established systems, proving that background doesn't determine destiny. Jessica Martinez had humiliated me for being poor, telling me I would never amount to anything worth her time. Now she cleaned the offices of the empire I had built, not as punishment for her past cruelty, but as a simple consequence of the choices we had both made along the way. The boy they had dismissed had indeed proven them wrong, but the victory, it felt quieter than I had imagined it would be. Success, it turned out, was not about making others pay for their mistakes. It was about becoming the person you were meant to be, regardless of who believed in you along the way. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.